Hey everybody, this week I wanted to spotlight an organization called WATERDROP LA that's providing water to the unhoused people on Skid Row here in Los Angeles during the brutal heat wave we're currently experiencing. This podcast has made a donation to WATERDROP LA and hopefully you'll do the same. Check out waterdropla.org to find out more and support their work. Thanks, and here's the rest of the show. Hello, and welcome to Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, you have no idea how you even feel about cooking because you've never tried it before, well, congratulations, you are in the right place. And the place at the moment is my small apartment kitchen in Los Angeles. I am DC Pierson. I am a comedian, author, and enthusiastic home cook. And my guest today, later on in the program, is going to be Billy Jensen. Billy Jensen is a true crime writer, investigator, all-around cool person who you may have seen recently in I'll Be Gone in the Dark, the documentary about Michelle McNamara's hunt for and subsequent book about the Golden State Killer, who was ultimately caught on the, right as the book was coming out. And she, unfortunately, I mean, if you saw the documentary, you know this already, and I would imagine 99% of the people listening to this probably know the story, but she died when she was working on completing this book that was the culmination of years and years of work that she had done. And Billy Jensen, who had been a friend of hers and a fellow, investigator person hunting this killer, was able to step in and complete the manuscript and sort of get the project over the finish line. And he is just a really, really, really neat, smart, funny, interesting person who I am so thrilled to have on the show. We've known each other for a weirdly long time. We go back to the Paleolithic age of 2010 or 2011 maybe, as you'll hear us talk about in this conversation. And I am thrilled to have Billy on the show. We had a really good time. And I think we're about to have a really good time right now making, what a segue, making summer shrimp scampi with tomatoes and corn. It's a New York Times recipe. I've circled back after saying I gotta not do so many recipes from the New York Times. I'm back. What can I say? It's just the flow I'm in, and this one looked so good because not only is it summer, but right now it is brutally capital S summer in LA. It's a heat wave, it's terrible, and this is going to be fast, so I don't have to be in the kitchen for very long. And it's also great that it's going to be fast because this is our actual no foolin' dinner. I have found a way to strap podcasting to the actual sustenance of my family, and it's like a very low stakes, but not completely low stakes version of speed. So let's get this done as quickly as possible. First of all, a quick check of my ingredients. Oh wait, I wanted to read this one thing in the recipe description. This recipe is by Allie Slagle. She says, a searing hot pan helps the tomatoes blister and the corn caramelize before they are coated in garlic lemon butter sauce. Shrimp doesn't even come into that, and it already sounds good. I'm so excited. She also says this is a meal in and of itself, but if you want to serve it with pasta or bread, they would be welcome additions. I already cooked off some pasta before we even started. That is how excited I am about this. Package directions. So let's get into the main event here. This recipe makes 4 servings. I'm going to be making 2 servings, so all of these ingredient amounts that I'm about to give out are for just the 2 servings. Half a pound of large shrimp, peeled and deveined. Got that. I do know how to devein shrimp. I learned over this last Christmas, but I will not have to put those skills to use today. Kosher salt and black pepper. Got those. 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. Half a pint of cherry or grape tomatoes. 1 cup of fresh or frozen corn kernels. I have some fresh corn that we'll be taking off of the cob here. I was just realizing this is, I'll give myself credit on this. There's a lot of food-related media out right now, some of it from people much better or smarter about food than I am, but here's where I'll give it up for this show. This has got to be some of the more honest food media out there that you could consume, because you can read the recipe and it says fresh or frozen corn kernels, or later on in the description, you know, like chopped parsley or fresh lemon juice. Well, who's gonna get the juice out of the lemon? Who's going to chop up the parsley? What, you just come and you read the ingredients list and you're like, oh, it only takes 15 minutes. No, they're hiding a lot of things, and we include all of that. We're honest about the fact that somebody is going to have to do all that stuff. Although I will say, thankfully, the shrimp is already peeled and deveined. Thank you, Gelson's Seafood Counter. So fresh or frozen corn kernels. Calls for, I guess, about 2.5 cloves of garlic. I'm going to go ahead and use 4 cloves of garlic because we always round up. Same deal with a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Probably going to use 1/2 teaspoon, if not more. 1/8 cup of dry white wine. I'm not going to open a bottle of wine just to use 1/8 cup of it, and we're probably not going to drink a whole bottle of wine tonight. And so for that reason, we will be just using some vermouth that I have in the fridge, like a little splash of vermouth. 1 tablespoon of fresh lemon juice that, again, we will be extracting from the lemon ourselves. Sorry, I'm a little bit slap happy because I just went for a run and I really, really want to eat. And then also some lemon wedges for serving. So I'll probably be juicing half of the lemon and then getting cutting up the other half into wedges. Like it says, it would be about 2.5 tablespoons of unsalted butter cut into 5 pieces. Going to go ahead and round up and do 3 tablespoon size pieces because they have the handy dandy thing on the wrapper that shows you how big a tablespoon is of butter. And then 1.5 tablespoons of chopped parsley or chives or torn basil leaves. I have parsley. So let's go ahead and start doing our mise en place steps. And let's start out with the ones I was just tooting my own horn about actually including for your listening pleasure. And I'm going to start out with the corn. How I like to do corn is take out a bowl and then peel it, shuck it. I guess just, yeah, this is shucking. We're shucking corn right now. Get off as many of the annoying stringy things as I can. Kind of like to do that over the sink, actually.
DC.
Yes.
Can I show you a corn trick?
Yeah, sure.
I just learned this and it's been a
Oh yeah, please.
You used to do it like this, and the kernels
right.
fly everywhere
Yeah.
across the bowl. But I've been doing it like this.
Oh.
And it's the same principle, but they just don't have as much, I don't know. They don't fly everywhere. They just land.
So can you still do it into the bowl, though?
You can, maybe not. You don't need to is the idea.
Gotcha.
But if you want to.
Because I kind of like to do it in the bowl.
Then do your thing.
Do you know what it, like into the bowl and then they get caught like that?
You do it however you want to do it. I'm just showing you I've been doing this method that doesn't necessitate the bowl because it doesn't fly everywhere. It just lands neatly in a pile where you chop it because you're so close to the ground.
Very interesting. Okay, we have 2 ears, so we'll
want.
try one your way and one my way, and then we'll see what happens.
Okay. Didn't mean to interrupt the record. I just heard you talking about corn, and I thought, I just learned a new
She got a corn trick.
Corn.
All right. Sweet, dude. We're going to try it.
Your method.
We're going to do both. No, we're going to do both.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Let me know when it's my turn.
Oh, wait, I don't get to do both of them? I thought I was doing both.
Oh, yeah, you do.
And then see which one I like better.
Yes, that makes so much more sense. Okay, bye.
All right, so as you just heard, Haley has proposed a different method, a different corn hack than the one I'm doing, which is laying it on its side, just on the cutting board. My cutting board is also very crowded right now because I have not a lot of space on the counter, so a lot of my various ingredients are crowding the cutting board as we speak. So that may affect things, but let's see. We're going to do it both. We're going to A-B it, as they say. All right, so first, the bowl method. Again, the reason we're using the bowl is because, as Haley was pointing out, they like fly everywhere. So we're just basically taking the corn, putting it like straight up and down into the bowl, and then from the top to the bottom, cutting down the sides and then the kernels fall into the bowl. So we did that with one ear. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention in the list of ingredients, it said in the original 4-serving recipe, 2 cups of fresh or frozen corn kernels. So we're doing 1 cup of fresh or frozen corn kernels, and that is from 2 ears of corn. In the original recipe, it says from 4 ears of corn, so I'm just dividing. Shucking my next ear. I was kind of hoping she was coming in here to give me a trick for all the little silk thingies. That is the thing I need the hack for. If you have a corn silk hack, please let me know. All right, so now we're trying it the sideways way. So placing the corn flat on the cutting board and then cutting along the sides. Maybe I'm just stuck in my ways. I don't like this way as much. Because then I feel like I'm going to put it into a bowl anyway. You know what I mean? A lot of corn tensions are running high in the household. Will they make it through corn season? So while I agree, especially if I had a less crowded cutting board, that it doesn't fly everywhere, which is great. I kind of was going to put it into a bowl anyway, so ultimately I think I'll go with the bowl method in the future. Because now I'm just picking it up off the cutting board and putting it into a bowl. Maybe if I was less bowl happy. Don't have to do anything to the tomatoes, that's exciting. Next up, I am going to mince my garlic. Just gonna place it on the cutting board, place my knife flat on top of it, carefully thwack the top of the knife, obviously the flat part, not the sharp part. Then the peel comes off easily, and then I just mince it. Okay, got the garlic cloves all minced up, and I'm gonna toss those in a bowl, and I believe they're going to go in at the same time as the red chili flakes, so I'm gonna put that in the bowl at the same time. I'll be ready to go when I need them. Now I am going to little lemon wedges going. So that's 1/2 the lemon, and then the other half I am going to juice to yield, hopefully, a tablespoon. Then excitedly throw the lemon rind into the garbage disposal because it makes the kitchen smell really good when you put it into the garbage disposal. It's like the most jarring sound-smell combination out there. And I guess I'm a little bit a part of the problem of hiding the prep steps in the ingredients list because I, before I even started recording, cut this butter up into pieces, so I guess I get the temptation. Now I'm going to chop up some parsley. And then we will get into the recipe itself, starting by taking out our shrimp and patting them dry. And in addition to being peeled and deveined, they don't have the tails on anymore, which is a presentation minus, but an eating plus. Ooh, they're really nice. They're really nice and big. All right, the shrimp is fully salted and peppered on both sides and dried. And now I am going to heat a large skillet to medium-high. They call for a 12-inch skillet. I got like an 8 to 10-inch cast iron that I think will work fine for my purposes because it's a smaller batch. The only thing that concerns me about it is I'm probably going to want to mix in the pasta with it, and I think once I start doing that, it'll be maybe be a little bit small, but I might just go against everything I believe and serve the pasta in the bowls and put the scampi on top and not fully integrate them. We'll see. So now that I have the skillet over medium-high, I'm going to add a tablespoon of olive oil. I'm trying to get in the habit of not adding the oil until the skillet is hot, especially olive oil, because apparently it can turn acrid if you leave it in a hot pan for too long. So we're just going to let it sit in the hot pan for a second and hopefully get hot, but not leave it in there for too long as the skillet itself is heating up. All right, and then we are going to add the shrimp. Kind of trying to carefully get each one laying in the pan with its own little bit of space. Perfect size. Great. Just going to cook it on one side for like 30 seconds to a minute, then flip it. And we are looking for it to be, as it says in the recipe, pink and lightly golden in spots. This recipe uses the phrase lightly golden a lot, and I'm in favor of it. And I kind of try to turn them over in the order that I laid them in. Yeah, these shrimp are beautiful. They're really big. And then I'm going to get out a plate while the shrimp finish cooking, because I will be withdrawing them to a plate once they are done. Or I should say done for now. I think we'll be adding them back in at the end. I don't want them to get overcooked, so I'm going to go on the slightly more conservative side. And I imagine there will be a little bit of carryover cooking where even after they get out of the pan, they will still continue to cook, and they already feel very firm, and I've only had them in here for like max 2 minutes. And so I took them out to the plate. It said slotted spoon. I ended up using some tongs, so there's still a decent amount of oil in the pan, and now I'm going to add my cherry tomatoes. And I'm just going to let them hang out and do their thing. This was part of the reason I was so excited to use a cast iron for this recipe as opposed to like a thinner pan. I just feel like the browning is nicer for stuff like this. I'm going to season with salt and pepper, and they are already like popping. I would say this is a little bit of a splashback hazard, so just be aware. But we're only going to be stirring them once or twice because we want to get some really nice browning on there, so I'm not going to touch them quite yet. But I am going to add the pepper. Ooh, and as soon as I went and started stirring them around, you could see there's some, I mean, it almost looks like when you see a close-up picture of like a planet where something has crash landed. There's like a big meteor impact. So stir them around. Yeah, they're definitely blistered in spots for sure. That's great. Cherry tomatoes, I have come to learn, are just a better tomato all year round. Like there's other types of tomatoes. I mean, tomatoes obviously can be really, really, really bad now, like very industrial tomatoes, but no matter what time of year it is, even when it's not peak tomato season, cherry tomatoes are still pretty good. It is something I learned at some point. And right now, they're probably going to be extra good because all tomatoes are good right now. All right, so I'm going to give them one last move around the pan. Call it good. They're definitely looking blistered in spots. And now I'm going to add the corn. And the tomatoes will continue to cook as well. And I think the principle here is similar. Going to want to try to not move. Well, hit it with salt and pepper first off, and then try not to move it around too much otherwise after I get everything kind of stirred around and integrated, because I want to get some nice browning on that corn. The pale golden factor. Oop. Just knocked some corn out of the skillet onto my slippers. And I've ended up almost kind of there's a decent amount of corn. It's like a couple kernels deep in the pan everywhere. And now the tomatoes have kind of stirred around in a way where the tomatoes are almost kind of like sitting on top of a bed of corn, which is okay because I think the tomatoes have gotten a lot of attention from the skillet, and I want to focus on the corn. So we are looking for the tomatoes to have burst and the corn to be golden in spots. I would say that a lot of the tomatoes have burst, and then some other ones haven't quite yet, but at this point I can just sort of help them along with my wooden spoon, and that's nice too, because then it adds a little bit of the moisture to the pan that was feeling kind of dry. Corn is getting nicely golden. All right, adding the garlic and red pepper flake and sort of stirring those around for adding an aromatics length of time, which in this case is about a minute. As the recipe says, just until you smell garlic. It's not smelling super garlicky. I feel like maybe because the pan got a little dry. There isn't a ton of... Oh, I lied. I just got ahead of it. Okay, great. Maybe we finally got enough moisture in there from the tomatoes to allow the garlic to have a medium to kind of fry in. Great. So in that period, I wanted to be stirring kind of the entire time, letting them get incorporated, and hopefully the garlic and pepper not burning, which I don't think it did. All right, then, reducing the heat to medium, going to add in my splash of vermouth. In my case, could be white wine, would be white wine in a vacuum, but this is already open. And then, now that I've added this vermouth and lemon as a deglazing agent, which is great because the pan was kind of crying out for moisture. Scrape any browned, cooked on bits off of the bottom of the skillet. Nice kind of a little cooked off boozy smell. It says cook until nearly evaporated. Yep, that's about where we're at. Then we're going to add the butter, stirring until the butter has melted. My butter's been out for a while, so it's already kind of soft. So adding my 2-3 pieces of butter, stirring that around, and then next we're going to add the shrimp and its juices from the plate. Not a ton of excess juice on the plate. Once the butter is melted, but not quite there yet, so I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, there we go. Now, before it dissipates anymore, going to add that shrimp back in and stir to warm it through. And it says if the sauce ends up kind of breaking or looking greasy, we can add a couple, a tablespoon or two of water and stir to emulsify. We'll see if that's necessary. In general, with this recipe, I'm always finding myself having a little less moisture to work with than I would think, so I'll keep an eye out for it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not wanting to keep it in there too long, because I don't want it to evaporate off. It's still looking buttery and good. And I think that's it. I might add just a little bit of water for an additional bit of sauciness and stir that around. Sauciness and stir that around. Just to have a little bit more liquid to work with, since it's going to be playing with some otherwise undressed pasta. All right, now I am going to, in my case, I'm going to put my starch into a couple of bowls. Pasta. And then I'm just going to, in a vacuum, I would maybe put it in something else, maybe get the pasta all integrated, but I think what I'm going to do is just classic, old style, family dinner style, pasta in the bowls, shrimp and sauce on top, and then add some parsley on there to garnish, or whatever herb you have, the chives, the basil, and then lemon wedges on the side for squeezing. One thing I'll say is I didn't overcook the pasta when I made it earlier, and then when I put it back in the pot, I tossed it in a little bit of olive oil so it looks slick and really appealing. This is going to be good. I'm excited. I would encourage you to enjoy this conversation with Billy Jensen. He's the best. He has a couple of podcasts you should check out. First of all, the one that you most likely know about, Murder Squad, Jensen And Holes. And he also has a podcast called The First Degree, which he talks about a little bit on this podcast that sounds really, really cool and very interesting and just kind of a different take on true crime stories. And he also he has a new book that he's working on right now that he talks about in our conversation, but he also has a book out right now called Chase Darkness with Me, about how he got into the world of investigating crimes and cold cases as a civilian, how you can do that. It's seems like a super cool book. Check that out wherever such things are. But for right now, please enjoy this conversation. Billy Jensen. So Billy Jensen, thank you for joining me. If this were a normal episode of the show, I would be placing a plate of hopefully delicious food in front of you. But since it's not a normal show and we are speaking remotely, all I can do is hope that the last thing you ate was delicious and satisfying.
Well, you did. I think the PR company sent me over just a box of Lunchables. I don't know what that was about. But,
something must have been lost in translation.
So... But no, my last meal was actually Taco Bell.
Do you have a go-to Taco Bell order?
Well, I sort of, since we're recording this right before Taco Bell removed many of the items off the menu, I sort of did a last sort of ditch wake for all of the potato items and just ordered everything that they're getting rid of. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself right now.
Is it literally, I knew they were getting rid of some menu items. I didn't realize that it was centered around potatoes.
Oh, this was an attack on potatoes. Make no mistake.
Wow.
This was very much, we don't want to carry potatoes anymore. And then, much to the chagrin and anger of the potato people, we learned yesterday that they're testing chicken wings. The Taco Bell people are. So you might be able to get chicken wings. They really are leaning into the hangover food with the hangover food staple, because they're the only fast food place that sells Gatorade.
I didn't, but that makes a lot of sense, and I do associate Taco Bell for whatever reason with like a blue drink. Like I associate Taco Bell with just like, this is a place where you can get some neon orange food and a like neon green or blue sort of like Mountain Dew Baja Blast frozen drink or something.
And it's colors that are not represented anywhere in nature.
No, exactly. But that's wild about the potatoes, because I do think of potatoes as being a somewhat, with their presence in so many breakfast foods, I think of potatoes as being a hangover-y food.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they, so they're sort of, I think they're going to, they're kind of doubling down on the meats maybe, and taking away the potatoes. But I know a lot of people, particularly there was a lot of vegetarians that were very upset over the potatoes being gone.
My youngest brother is a erstwhile, I'm just realizing now that I don't know what erstwhile means actually when I said that, but vegetarian, vegan, like eats vegetarian and vegan quite a bit. And I remember him saying like, oh yeah, like the potato wedges at, I want to say Jack in the Box are some of the best like vegan or vegetarian food that you can get at fast food places. And it makes sense to me that, a lot of those sort of like potato centric items that aren't just French fries would be a go-to, especially for vegetarians, like just potatoes and cheese. Sure. Like, why not? Let's do it. Now you actually have something that you can order there. But I guess unfortunately, nobody's ever gone broke like overestimating or underestimating American fast food consumers' appetite for just straight up meat.
No, that's the reason why the McRib comes back every year. Set your lunar clock to it.
But don't you think it's a little bit diminished by the fact that it feels like the McRib is always, it's forever back. It's like in that period in the late 90s and early 2000s when Madonna's whole thing was being like, she's constantly reinventing herself. And you were just like, but I feel like she's never, after a point, we're not being allowed to get tired of the Madonnas that we have.
Yes. No, we're never tired of the McRib. We want our meat to look like it's from the Flintstones and slathered with barbecue sauce, put some onions on there, and it's a wonderful thing. I do miss, McDonald's once had a steak sandwich back in the 80s. And it came with steak sauce, and it came with like sort of like little like onion nugget type of things. And it was delicious. And they do not have that anymore.
Was it
I would like to
like
see that come back. Yeah.
cubed steak or shredded steak or what
I think it was
the steak presented?
I think it was like a hamburger, you know, but they made it seem very kind of, you know, the advertising campaign was very similar to, you know, trying to show that it was like a steakhouse type of thing, you know, just trying to play into that. But I miss that. I miss the old school McDonald's and the things that they were when they were trying. It doesn't seem like they're trying anymore, but when they were trying, you know, it was like that McFresh one where they actually did double the packaging. We're actually going to, I forgot, remember that one? We're actually going to, cool side stays cool, hot side says hot. I forgot the name of what that was, but.
Was that the McDLT?
The McDLT, yeah. We're going to give you, we know that styrofoam's bad for you, but you know what? We're going to, and we know our food is probably kind of bad for you, but we're going to double down on both of those and actually give you 2 sets of,
I like that you've now used the phrase double down in reference to the actions of 2 different fast food franchises, neither of which are KFC.
Yes.
The place that is most aggressive.
I leave that to Patton. Patton does the. I don't think Patton has ever taken on McDonald's or Taco Bell, but he certainly has taken on KFC. So.
I feel like he's sort of had his entry in the, you know, it's like he's sort of like anything else after that would be diminishing returns. He took
on Denny's now. Now he's going into the services where you actually have to sit down at a place. So that's what his newest special is. He's got a whole 15-minute bit on Denny's. just in time for nobody to be able to go inside to Denny's.
Anywhere.
Denny's is, yeah, exactly. Not here, but I've seen Denny's open in other parts of the country. Yeah.
Don't you, sorry to get into just straight up pandemic stuff this early in a podcast that's ostensibly supposed to be somewhat of an escape from that for people, but I do think it's interesting, the sort of, and very depressing also, but the sort of weird, like, almost like cargo cult aspects of certain things about the pandemic, where it just feels like we're all a little bit living in this. It's like every person has their sort of like vague accumulated knowledge from throughout the pandemic of like what's safe and what's not safe. And it's sort of like, I think you're still supposed to disinfect your groceries, but also you stand 6 feet away from people and you then it's just like, and I think what we've really come down to is just like, yeah, don't be around other people's like breath. Don't be in a place where that's accumulating. Be in a place like ideally outside where it can be as diffuse as possible. And it's best if everybody's wearing masks because that will prevent the shitty stuff that will get you sick in your breath from accumulating or being transmitted to people at as rapid of a rate. Like, I don't think, I feel like we've all ended up with just a weird sort of, we've like accumulated all of these other old wives' tales in the 6 months that this has been going on that we're all still a little bit operating under, all the way up to sort of like, I feel like Universal Studios Orlando or whatever, where it's just sort of like, we're reopening. Look, we'll spray a lot of things down, where you're just like, I don't think that's the issue as much. I don't know.
I mean, the thing with me is we know what can stop it. And, you know, everybody was giving Disneyland or Disney World and Universal a lot of guff for opening, but if we all operated under the rules for the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks of that they operate at Disney World, this would be gone, which is everybody has to wear a mask and stay 6 feet away from each other. And I would be willing to roll the dice on that than whatever the hell that we're doing now. And this would be gone, but people just don't want to do it. So it really is. It's gone from, you know, the disinfecting the mail and all that stuff. And it's really gone from the biggest thing, which is you can't be indoors with other people, especially other people that you don't know. And when you're outside with them, you got to, you know, stay 6 feet apart from them. You can go to a park and sit on a blanket and they could be on the other side of the blanket and it's totally fine. You could take off your mask at 6 feet apart. I'm okay with that. Some people are saying 10 feet apart. It depends actually on the humidity in the air, actually.
And that's interesting.
Yeah, it actually goes farther if there's less humidity. So, so in places like California, which has less humidity, or Arizona, it can go farther than say Texas and that kind of thing. So, but I think that we just got to follow those things. We don't have to go, it's just, whenever I go back into my car, I have the hand sanitizer and I put it on, I wash my hands, but, and try not to touch my face. But, bottom line is it's wearing a mask, not being around people that you don't know indoors, and then, staying 6 feet apart. That's it.
Isn't it crazy that just in this 4 or 5 line back and forth, we have arguably leaped into the like top 5 of sort of like now public health information disseminating institutions just with that on this
with the Taco Bell war on potatoes, and those are the things that's going on right now.
I would say this might be controversial. I think we have a little bit of a leadership vacuum and a little bit of an expertise crisis in this country. I'll be the first person to say it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the fact that Trump, stands by as Taco Bell gets rid of the potatoes is just really. Oh God!
If not, first they came for.
I mean, it's the 160,000 dead that are on his hands, and the economy that he ruined because of his response. It's also the Taco Bell potatoes.
It's everything at once. But I do think there is something weirdly. It's not. I'm gonna be reaching here, and it's really mostly not to make a larger point about society, but just to make a larger point about something dumb like fast food, which is that I do think there is a when you see like decision making made on that scale where it's like an entire corporation is going to be like, yeah, we actually know that like there's tons and tons of people out there. Ostensibly our job is to provide food for people that's like inexpensive and fast and delicious and probably like fun, right? And all that stuff. And we have a lot of people who really like our potato items, including some people who that is literally dietarily all they can eat on our menu. But for, it actually costs us, we lose for every whatever crate of potatoes that gets sent to our processing plant to be processed into the cubes that we then send on prepackaged to the restaurant or whatever. We actually lose like 2 cents on every crate because some of the potatoes get damaged and we can't figure out how to make them not somewhat irregularly shaped because they're potatoes. So you know what? We're actually just going to get rid of all that to give more value to our shareholders. And that's more important to us than...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's the thing of I remember reading that Olive Garden stopped salting the water in their pasta. Well, like when they make their pasta because it would cause the pots at their restaurant that they cook the pasta in to degrade at a slightly higher rate. Like they would have to replace the pots ever so slightly more frequently. So they actively decided to not do one of the most important things to adding like flavor to Italian food, which is like salting the pasta water and making the pasta taste good.
Well, it's the same thing when Chuck E. Cheese took the band away, Oh, I'm sorry. It takes they have to, they have to service the band and all this stuff, and they just take it away. Meanwhile, I love that band, man. And I love this. I'm waiting Coachella, 2030 when that band gets back together.
Were they the Rockafire Explosion? Was the Rockafire Explosion or no, that was at Showbiz Pizza.
That was Showbiz Pizza, yeah.
Did you ever watch the YouTube where a guy just has he purchased from a Showbiz Pizza that was closing the entire, for people that don't know what we're talking about, a lot of these sort of like pizza chain restaurants for kids used to have animatronic bands that would like play a show. Like you would like go into a showroom and then at every hour on the hour or whatever, these animatronic animals would like play a concert. Mm-hmm. And there's a guy on YouTube who bought an entire Rockafire Explosion band, which I think was different animals playing different things. Yeah. I think like the gorillas playing the drums or whatever. But anyway, he now has reprogrammed. He programs it to play different songs. So it can he's got the Rockafire Explosion, but they can play like a whiter shade of pale or whatever.
Okay,
and,
all right.
Check it out.
There's a play. The McClintock Theaters in Tempe, Arizona, bought one, and they just have it in the lobby, and they're just playing music. and it's cool. And that's like a $2 theater too, so you can just go in and watch them and pay $2 and play little asteroids and.
Oh, that's just a straight up movie theater?
Yeah, it's just a straight up movie theater.
Wow.
The guy just likes to buy stuff like that, and he just has it in the, it's just like, I wish I had the space for something like that. But, being a big fan of Disney and being a big fan of animatronics, that whole Chuck E. Cheese thing. And there was a bunch of other ones. There was a place called Bullwinkle's, which was like, which is the whole Rocky and Bullwinkle theme type of thing that had the animatronics. Even Warner Brothers had one that was like, Bugs Bunny and things in a local place. I remember there was one in Garden City, Long Island, where you would go and then you would eat pizza and like watch a sort of a Bugs Bunny show.
So I think what you're saying is there's a whole generation of pizza-related animatronics that are just out there drifting around.
They're somewhere. They're somewhere out there. Yeah, exactly.
I forget, are you from Arizona?
I grew up on Long Island. I have a house in Arizona, and I have a place up here in Los Angeles.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yes, because I'm from Phoenix. So you had mentioned earlier, right. You mentioned Arizona in regards to the absolute shit show that is going on there with COVID, and is very. You know what's
interesting, because my wife's a scientist, so she's plugged into.
Please speak comfort to me, Billy.
she's plugged into the to everything that's going on there, and they've actually got it. Arizona has gotten it. I don't know when this is going to come out, but as of August 8th, they've got it way better under control than it was last month. They did a decent job of it. It's not like it's going on. The real bad places right now are really Florida and Texas, but Arizona had gotten a little bit better in terms of the transmission and the ICU beds and all of that. So, it's tough for Arizona because you can't eat outside because it's so hot out. So it's not like in California, everyone's like, hey, we're going to open up a beer garden in the back. That's great. You can't do that in Arizona until October. So people are kind of, this is the time when people are going to get stir crazy. But then in the winter, Arizona is going to feel a lot better because people will be able to just do a lot of stuff that's outside. So we'll see. So we're waiting for the vaccine.
Contributes to the whole kind of whack-a-mole nature of it. Speaking of games that would be in a Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese.
But I get looping back to less of the overtly depressing reality that we're living in, because we'll definitely get back there. How does home cooking fit in or not fit into your life at the moment?
Home cooking fits in it depends on what you define as home cooking. I don't cook. I go to, this is my typical meal when I'm here. I go to Trader Joe's. Mm-hmm. I pick up a chicken breast, the balsamic chicken breast, and then some of the salads, the barbecue chicken salads, and some ice cream and some vodka. I think and some protein bars and beef jerky. That's what is in my cart. If you ever see me at the Trader Joe's, I walk back with that, and that's what I'm eating basically for 4 or 5 days. And then I might treat myself within this pandemic. I might treat myself to an Uber Eats, McDonald's perhaps. I'm a big fan of the Happy Meal. Big fan of any meals that come with some sort of toy. I've always wanted to open a steakhouse where you would actually get a sort of like like the sort of artisanal action figures that you see now, are the artisanal toys,
I feel like I know where you're going with this, and I'm not even that much of a toy guy, but I really like that idea.
Yeah. And, that would be, that's pretty much it. But as far as like myself cooking, if you could call my kids up right now and say, they're grown now, but they'd say, look, what did your dad cook you when your mother was at work? And they would say two things. They would say peanut butter and jelly or cereal. That was it. I also sent my kids to daycare once in their pajamas. So thinking that they were actually sick. So I think, but you know what? They're adults now.
You said they're grown.
Succeeded, and
you said they're grown, and there's somebody we can call on a phone. I think you did fine.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, yeah. So no home cooking, and then I will grill on occasion. Not here because I have an apartment here, but I will grill out in Phoenix. I'm a very much, when it comes to food, very much a meat potatoes guy. I do like to limit the carbs because, just to stay trim. And, I got a sweet tooth, so I'm always going to, I always have to have some sort of something sweet at the end of every meal. I will say that.
I think there's an importance to that. My wife is a big believer in that. Like, you have to just have that little, like, it can be anything. It can be like an Andes mint, but you have to have that
Hershey's
little
kiss. Or an Andes
grace
mint,
note,
something like that. Just it's something that just says, all right, you're done. That cleans the palate. Go off and be a human now after you've just gorged yourself. Yeah.
Is the balsamic chicken, is that one of the frozen ones? Is that one refrigerated? I don't think I've ever gotten it.
It is refrigerated, and the sauce on it is just great. So, you heat it up for 2.5 minutes or something like that, and then there's just a ton of protein. So I'll do a workout and then I'll eat that, and then I'm usually pretty good for the for the day. Might snack on little things here or there, but yeah.
Are you somebody that needs a lot of variety in terms of food, or is it pretty much just like, I'm somebody where I find my niche, this is what I like, let me just hit that, and I know that's there, and then I can move on with my day?
Yeah, I'm very much one of those people that food is it's not any sort of real source of joy for me. It's more just, okay, I have to do it, and here it is. So, I'm way more of a drinker. I'm way more of a cocktail guy, and I like that. But when it comes to like, oh, I've got to, I've been eating like regular food this whole time. I want to go out and get some Italian food or something like that. There's never really those cravings. I'll do it, and I like it, and I love restaurants, and I can't wait to be able to go back to them. But it's never really something that I'm just like banging my head against the wall saying I have to eat sushi right now. And it's just not the way I'm built, which is good. It annoys my wife because she always wants to go out and try new things and stuff like that. But I'm sort of a guy where it's just like, all right, just feed me and let me go solve some crimes or something, because that's usually what I'm focused on.
Sure. I was going to say, it seems like something that's very well suited to your lifestyle. Do you know what I mean? Like, those two things feel very in tandem to me somehow. It's sort of just,
and that's, maybe it comes from growing up as a journalist, and just, you're constantly, all you're eating is the Snickers bar or a piece, we order pizza, and like, you're eating it at your desk while you're typing, it's just shoving stuff into your pie hole in order to be able to keep working. And there is actually, in the book, there is a scene of eating in the book, because we go to Delmonico's and get a steak. And so Delmonico's was a place, and the reason why I mentioned it in the book is because that's where, I don't know if you've ever read the book The Alienist or watched the TV show The Alienist, but that's where like the crew from The Alienist goes to try and solve a murder. And that's where the two things were invented there. I think it was one lobster dish was invented there, but also the baked Alaska was invented there. So I remember, so this was actually the day before Golden State Killer was captured. I had a meal there that I'll never forget because, and I'd gotten there because it was the 20th anniversary of my dad passing away. And I was just like, let's go get a steak. And I told my wife we were in New York, and we went to Delmonico's and had this like really fancy dinner. And eating that baked Alaska, which was such I don't know if you ever had one before, but such an odd, interesting taste for a dessert. And then the next day I was in Chicago, and then we were doing that book event, and then we found out the GSK was caught.
Wow, that is, I mean, isn't it? It's so interesting how things kind of indelibly stick. Like little things. Adhere themselves to moments in that way. Was your dad a steak guy?
Oh yeah, no, he loved going to steaks. We used to go to a place called Cookies on Long Island, and they used to have really good Romanian skirt steak. And he was definitely a big steak guy. So, and he actually liked, his thing was prime rib though, which I don't really enjoy. I'm more of a filet guy, but whenever he would go out, he would get the prime rib if it was a place that was known for prime rib.
Do you ever, I have so many questions. Okay. First question off of steak. What is Romanian skirt steak? Is that a preparation style?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit like, it had a little bit of a teriyaki type flavor to it, I think.
Ooh, yum.
So it had a sauce on it. And I think as a kid, I liked it because it had more of a flavor as opposed to, you got to get used to the steak flavor, but
Right.
this had a little bit more of a sweetness to it. So I remember liking that there. And that was also a place too. Cookies was a place that had a salad bar, and it also had a dessert bar too. So that was always a treat to go to Cookies. I think it was in Hicksville, Long Island.
There's also something very endearing about a place named Cookies that's not primarily a dessert place. It's a steak place.
Yeah.
It's very much just says like, yeah, this place was founded by somebody named Cookie, and this is what she called it. So so come on in for a steak. That rules. So that kind of leads me to another question in regards to your dad. I mean, also it's so fucking, there's something weirdly sadistically thrilling about having you for an interview and then you bring up the Golden State Killer and then being like, but tell me more about what your dad used to eat. There's got to be so many I can just imagine so many Jensen and Hole listeners who, thank you for tuning in, please subscribe, are like, wait, what? No, I want to hear more about that, whatever, which I do as well. I'm just trying not to be too obvious. But who did you see cooking around you growing up?
That was my mother. Yeah. So my mom grew up in an Italian household. So, and we had these, so her family, it was, she had a lot of great aunts and they all lived in Little Italy. They all lived on like Mott Street and Mulberry Street in Little Italy. So they would come for the holidays and they would cook. So, and Gracie would do the gravy and it was very much out of that. So my mother, she prided herself on making the pasta, prided herself on, she also had this cookbook from McCall's, and any Gen X people that are listening might remember their family having it if you grew up in the suburbs. But it was this cookbook that she got a lot of different things out of. There was this one thing called Specialty, which was like kind of like mac and cheese with ground beef, but it had and onions. There was another thing where there was meatloaf with a surprise in it, which turned out to be like a hard-boiled egg in the middle of it. I mean, we're talking about like the 60s and 70s. That's where this book was from, So like a lot of like weird stuff that would come out of that would be like, oh, that's interesting. Sloppy Joes, that kind of thing. And then eventually, when she went back to work, she became a guidance counselor. I was on my own a lot, and then it was a lot of Stouffer's French bread pizza. I don't know if you remember those, but that was, I remember eating a lot of those growing up. And that was, and then if there was never anything in the house, think about growing up, if there was never any snacks in the house, the go-to snack that I have to make on my own was Ritz crackers and peanut butter, because you always had those in the house. There was always that in the house. So that was always like, I could do that and make chocolate milk. And then that was like my go-to snack when there wasn't any Chips Ahoy in the house or something.
So goddamn wholesome. Yeah, no, I've always been a huge peanut butter fan, and I was realizing recently that I'll see, people tweeting about like, oh my God, stress eating during the pandemic. And I turned around and I had this crazy ice cream sundae at 11 in the morning and blah, 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 blah. And really just going like, oh man, I haven't really thinking to myself, like, I haven't been doing that like at all. I really haven't been stress eating that much. Like I've definitely been stressed, but that really hasn't been how it's been manifesting itself. Isn't that interesting? And then I turned to my wife the other night and I was like, I just realized that we're about to finish a jar of peanut butter, and I am in serious danger of having finished this entire jar of peanut butter, because I know I've been pretty much the only person eating it without it ever having touched like bread or a cracker or whatever. Like I've just finished this whole like standard size jar of crunchy peanut butter, like walking into the kitchen and eating it with a spoon.
Who else used to eat peanut butter like that?
Do tell.
Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State
Killer.
God. I swear to God. When he was eating peanut butter out of the, which I've done too, no judgment, except he's the devil. But yeah, he was drinking a lot of this is what they found. They found a lot of Dr. Pepper cans, and he was eating peanut butter right out of the tub.
Oh God. Okay. Here's the thing, Billy. I also fucking love Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper's good, man.
To me it is the pinnacle of soda. Like if brown sugary sodas are an American art form, I feel like Dr. Pepper was our pinnacle. That's our Citizen
absolutely.
Kane.
And first of all, it's made from a physician, so you know it's good. And
True.
second of all, it's just got a taste that has not been replicated except for the evil Mr. Pibb. You know, when you have Mr. Pibb just lurking around, and I don't know how that happened. I don't know who stole whose. I don't want to get into any. I know that the soda Twitter can be ruthless on you, and I don't want to draw the ire of soda Twitter. But I don't know who stole whose formula or whatever. But that Mr. Pibb versus Dr. Pepper rivalry is something to always look to when you're looking at the biggest rivalries in history. You know, Red Sox, Yankees. France, England, and then
Mr. Doctor. Yeah, and I feel like Mr. Pibb now, which is a cause for suspicion. I feel like the only Mr. Pibb you can get or see is Mr. Pibb Extra. Like it's called Extra for some reason, and I don't know what the extra is. To me, it's always been the same anywhere you get Mr. Pibb.
I bet Mr. Pibb Extra probably has more caffeine in it. That's the only thing.
Gotcha. Sure, I would buy that. And they're trying to press that's their difference maker with Dr. Pepper, which I do really enjoy. And I did want to ask you about that because that is something that I was struck by reading the book, watching the series, that being, and I thought that that Liz Garbus, the documentarian, did such an amazing job on so many levels, such a amazingly well put together, super visually striking documentary. And it had some of the creepiest and also I think the least, because I mean, you've been a passionate about true crime in these stories and investigating them for a really long time. And a lot of the, as she even showed in the documentary, a lot of the reenactments in these kinds of things can be pretty kind of laugh-inducing.
Yeah.
Like they're reenacting something really serious and then there's a super cheesy or exploitative reenactment. And I thought she did such a good job with all of the visuals, the sort of like restagings of the scenes were also, just so well thought out and really put you there. And the food, I mean, the imagery of the food that the Golden State Killer would like eat when he was in people's homes was so striking and kind of horrifying, and I think also just horrifying in the mundanity of it. Like just imagining like, oh yeah, it could be like around Christmas and he would take the turkey carcass out of your fridge and eat it. That there was something, I don't even know if I'm building to a question here, but just to say like there was something so revolting about the idea that it's like this guy is going to come into your home and amongst all of the myriad other horrific sort of violations that he is going to put on these people and on their home and on their lives and all that different stuff, that he's also going to eat their fucking like food. That's so, there's something, I don't know.
It's so medieval almost. I'm king here. I've just entered your home. And I'm going to, if he's talking to the man, I'm going to rape your woman. If he's talking to, I'm going to rape you. I'm going to steal things that are important to you. I'm going to stay here as long as I'd like, at least for the night. And I'm going to eat your food. And then eventually he would take their lives. And it was something, one of the things that really frustrates me, and obviously hindsight is always 20/20, but looking back on it and knowing that cops, he was always sort of, when he was on the force, they called him Junk Food Joe. That was his nickname because he loved to eat. He was always eating junk food. Then he gets arrested for stealing the dog repellent and a hammer. Those things should have been on radar of any cop then, and all of those cops, even though it was happening, northwest of where Sacramento was, should have put two and two together. A guy is doing this, is breaking into a place, and he's also eating junk food. You know what I mean? It just seems like there were so many parts that were missed that really just get you so angry. at the end of the day, especially considering that these were cops. These were cops that were around him. They called him Junk Food Joe. They knew there was something off about him because he was always kind of like the guy that was never really part of the gang, you know? And there was even thoughts. People were thinking of it. People wrote about maybe it is a cop when he was the East Area rapist. Maybe this is a cop because he knew. I definitely thought it was somebody that had a police scanner because he knew where the police were going to be and then would attack at other places. So with all of that swirling around, with that thing, cop, eating junk food, you know, dog repellent and a hammer, and somebody should have put those together and shone a light on him. And this guy wasn't on anybody's radar.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's insanely frustrating. And that was another one of the things that I was struck by, particularly in the documentary, was the sort of like jurisdictional pissing contest / every department kind of being like, well, it's not our problem, and aggressively resisting for years. I mean, on up until it seemed like Michelle and maybe a couple of other people who were looking into the case saying like, I think these are the East Area rapist and the original Night Stalker. I think these are the same guy. And then all the way back to the Visalia ransacker, that everybody else was resisting. At every point, all of these agencies were resisting putting these things together and in a way that would help them ultimately find the guy, you would think, but were resisting that because they wanted to, you know, not reduce property values basically, or other, you know, just for other sort of like self-interested political reasons.
And not wanting to make these connections. That jurisdictional nonsense still happens to this day. You know, we've got 17,000 different law enforcement agencies. They say that, you know, they definitely talk to each other better than they did back then, but it's still the communication and the organization and the cooperation between them is still incredibly poor.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting and depressing. And it is something where you think about, okay, so this is ostensibly all of these departments, law enforcement agencies, you know, when people say, oh, they're not effective at the job that they're supposed to do at policing, they would point to these types of violent crimes, right? And say like, well, don't come crying to us when you get sexually assaulted or murdered or whatever, because you are trying to devalue us in society or whatever. And it's so frustrating. On the one hand, it's like you see these individual detectives who I do believe were very dedicated to the case over the years, but then you also see these larger systems in place where it was like, it seems like on a larger institutional level, so many people were actively resisting trying to solve this case.
Yeah, you're right. And then it's also a matter of, you know, the way that we investigate older crimes too, because it's not going to be in their statistics for that year. So, you know, we're so run by this idea of like, well, what were the crime numbers last year, I suppose, you know, and if it should be, particularly unsolved murders, should be a political motivation. You should be saying, you know what, bottom line, if your murder clearance rate is low, you're going to have more murders because the same people are going to go around killing other people. And we've seen that. The murder rates actually dropped in New York and LA once they started solving more murders. And they went up in places like Chicago because they're not solving any of them. So you've got this situation where you've got 15,000 murders every year. A third of them go unsolved. So that leads 220,000 since 1980. That number is just growing and growing and growing. There's nobody working on those cases right now, you know, and that's one of the frustrating parts of working in this realm is that there's always going to be you're never going to be done because that mountain just keeps getting larger and larger and larger.
That is intensely frustrating. How do you, as somebody who, you know, is bringing awareness to these cases, investigating these cases as a civilian, how do you stay motivated and how do you keep other people motivated in the face of that? And also, I guess another question I would have, and again, this is a question that I'm asking on my like fun, gentle home cooking podcast. How do you is there an effect seen or anything just in terms of like, right now there's just this like rolling death toll from COVID that shows no signs of stopping in America, very unfortunately, and is almost just becoming this in the lives of people not immediately affected by it, who haven't had a loved one die, is almost seeming to become like a national debt level, just sort of like, it's a number that just goes up or whatever. I'm not trying to make a statement about the national debt. I'm just saying like it becomes a sort of abstract number. How do you kind of also say, but there's other things that are happening to people, there's other people dying, there's these old cases, there's these whatever. How do you kind of keep that flame alive for people, I guess, is what and for yourself?
I think that's been one of the places that journalism has failed us in this during COVID, is that it's just been a number. And they're just reporting the number, and they're not reporting the stories. I know New York Times, tried to put a bunch of names on the front cover at one point, which got some attention. The obits should be in every newspaper. We should be talking about these people and these lives that are being lost, because it's become a numbers game, like you said. When 9/11 happened, we saw obits, at least in the New York papers, we saw obits for months and months and months. We need to be doing that. That should be being done, because you're right. We are just seeing this as numbers. So, because people are seeing it as numbers, they're looking for other stories too. The one story, as far as a COVID case that, that caused a murder, even though it had, really nothing, somebody wasn't sick, is that there was a guy in Virginia who was arrested for raping a woman. She testified against him in a prelim. He's held without bond. And then his lawyers say, well, because of the pandemic, we should let him out. They actually let him out. He gets out and then kills the woman who he raped.
Oh,
this happened 2 days ago.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, that's going to get, people riled up more even than these numbers that we're putting out, So, as much as journalism really has failed us on a level with, even if you just start from 2016 and starting with how much they focused on Hillary's emails, to up till now, they're just so much of them have lost the plot on how to put. They've lost the whole idea of how to tell a story. This is a story about people that are dying. Tell those people's stories. I know that the newsrooms are depleted, but you're not putting any human face on it. You have been putting human faces on it in terms of the first responders and the healthcare workers, but you haven't been really putting any human faces on the dead, and they need to.
Right. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. And I mean, in the story you're describing, I hadn't heard that, but it also is like uniquely infuriating when it feels very, unfortunately, I guess, American, I would say, but like you have this one individual story, which is truly horrifying and should not have happened. And then on a larger institutional level, it's like, okay, we have the willingness there's one shady lawyer that got this dude off, and then he killed this woman who he had already raped. But then on a larger institutional level, it's like there's a resistance to like, we should be letting nonviolent drug offenders out of jail and other people who have never hurt anybody, because in these institutions, it's just absolutely like buzzsawing through human lives. You know what I mean? Like there's a resistance to doing it on a larger level, but then this one thing happens, and I think you're completely right. It will get a lot of attention, and it should get a lot of attention, but it's one of those things that just feels so horribly imbalanced. Oh, that's horrible. Obviously this is a terrible time. Are there things, or are there rituals that you are kind of coming back to sort of keep you going or keep you sane, be they like work-related rituals or non-work related?
Just making sure that I go for walks, I think that's just putting on, getting up and then putting on some shoes, and taking a walk, putting on headphones, listening to a podcast or something like that, just getting my blood pumping. It makes me feel, at least you see people out there. I'm definitely missing a lot of that human contact, but that's definitely been a ritual of trying to get in 10,000 steps and working out every day. And then, but it's tough. It's definitely tough to get into like I'm working on these series of killings in Ohio for my next book, and I can't go out there. I can't do the kinds of interviews that I need to do. So everything just keeps on getting pushed back and pushed back. So, but eventually, it's you got to fall into some type of a groove before this thing is over. And I say over meaning, before we can actually, all congregate in places. I think there's going to be a big difference between when we can all go to a bar and then when we can all go to a concert hall. And, I think, the writing has been the sort of, it's tough. It's tough to sort of, it's tough to do the reporting. The writing is one thing, and you could always write. Writing's a solitary thing anyway, but doing the reporting has been the toughest thing.
Actually, like getting a hold of people, going to places, and just kind of doing the beating the bushes. That was another thing I thought the documentary did such a great job of in exploring Michelle's process, where she would go, and I think this is probably relatable to many writers out there, not just people who, not just reporters or people that are doing true crime stuff, where she was describing like, yeah, so I can like sit down and like write the book. It's all of this like research and just like thinking that I have to do, like all of this just like stuff that I have to go through.
And there was always one other thing, there was always one other box to look through. There was always one other clue to hunt down. That's why, when she passed and we were working on the book, I would always joke and say like, why couldn't she have left us with like the Black Dahlia or something where it was just one or two crime scenes and that's it. We were talking about, over 50 crime scenes, 50 rapes, at least 50 rapes, at least 13 murders, not even counting Visalia. And, one of them is counting Visalia, but I think it's, there was just so much there, and she did not want to leave a stone unturned.
Right.
And she was she would go down rabbit holes a lot, and she would say to me, like, I think I solved it. Like I solved it. I think and then when she got a DNA hit, and then it turned out to be nothing, or, just texted me out of the blue saying, what do you know about motocross? Because there was like a motocross glove that was left at one of the crime scenes. It was like that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff can take up your whole day. You're out there like reading, motocross magazines from like, the 1970s, trying to figure out what this glove is from, and it might not even be involved in the case at all. So there was so many of those from the map that was left at the scene, or the homework evidence, just like a whole bunch of stuff that was that like a lot of people kind of obsess over.
Yeah, it does. Do you think that, I mean, because you described, being like into like Disney stuff, sort of, collecting stuff, things like that. Do you think that having an obsessive personality led you to true crime and just going like, okay, I have kind of an obsessive personality. So, or I shouldn't even say true crime, like, just led you to crime, the world of investigating crimes? Or do you think it was sort of like, well, it was crime, and then I developed this obsessiveness? Do you know what I mean? Like,
no,
was there a chicken and egg
personality before? Absolutely. In anything that I did, I went all in on, from like collecting baseball cards as a kid and being very meticulous about, like putting them in order and doing all that and what I needed and who I needed and that kind of thing. And trading with friends, and going from that to music and cataloging the music and having to get every album by this artist or that artist, and wanting to be sort of a completist. And I definitely have an obsessive personality, and I think that that's definitely played into it, no matter what I was going to do. And it's, if you're going to obsess over something, and I know that listen, the documentary definitely was dealing, one of the themes was obsession, and
Yeah.
and what was that? Michelle. I remember Michelle asking me like, "What's this going to be like if after he's caught?" She was worried about because she had directed so much energy towards this guy, and I said, you've written about other cases before. You're never gonna forget your first one. Everything's gonna be a come down after this, but you're gonna have other cases. You're gonna dig into something else. You're gonna dig into the Colonial Parkway murders, or dig it back into Zodiac, or whatever. Uh, and it's just, yeah, I think having that obsessive personality has definitely played very well into doing what I do.
Have you found that for yourself, after, okay, this guy's been caught, and then, you had, put so much work into completing Michelle's book. Okay, then almost seemingly simultaneously, like I almost remembered it as being like the day Michelle's book came out, then he was caught. Like I that's really how conflated they were in my head. And I remember listening to you and Paul Holes on My Favorite Murder, and that whole, like, I just remember it all happening like in one like moment almost, seemingly. Has there been that period of time for you of feeling somewhat bereft by, okay, now that this chapter is seemingly closed? Did it come at the end of if finishing the book? Did it come, now that the documentary has fully aired? Like, has there been that interval for you?
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling a come down right now. Ironically, though, because I'm actually doing an interview with 2020 about it. But I think, and it's going to pop up again too, because the victim impact statements start on August 18th, and then right before his sentencing. So, but I definitely felt a come down after that last episode of just sort of, this is a chapter that is not completely closed in my life, but it's the door is definitely shutting, and there's a little bit of melancholy over here for that. In terms of not that I wish he was still out there, nothing stupid like that, but just like, it's sort of the last thing for that Michelle worked on, and keeping that flame alive. And, there's definitely, I've been feeling that a lot. I've actually talked to a couple of people about that, about this sort of come down that I've had since the last episode aired.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's so many ways that the impact that Michelle McNamara made will reverberate forever, right? Like, so many different things. Like, she, was kind of one of the leaders of this movement of these like citizen detectives. Like, the fact that this guy was caught is going to be so important for all of these victims and all of these different things, and she was a wife and a mom, and like all of these different impacts that she had, all of the inspiration that she's provided to so many people. But I know what you mean when there is a, somebody's gone, and there's a feeling that they're gone when they die, but there's also a little bit of like that feeling of those other things that will hit you at weird times that remind you like, oh yeah, this is not somebody that can respond to you. I was very struck when you said like she would text me out of the blue, because I have friends who have died and loved ones who have died. And now I feel like there's a weird feeling of like, oh yeah, I used to just like text that person a bunch. Mm-hmm. That was my sort of dumb, I saw a dumb Sopranos meme, so I'm going to text my friend and we're just going to get into a dumb conversation for 20 minutes. And almost feeling like this person primarily lives on my phone because we don't live in the same place. And so it's very easy to understand that it's like the person's not physically here anymore, but it almost feels like they should still be there, that you could text them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, I remember like coming up with this idea of like creating mortality virtually, in that, and it was more for like Twitter, where you would create a bot that would be able to, and this wasn't about Michelle. This is like 10 years ago. This is how ridiculous I was, that you'd be able to create yourself and what you would say digitally, and how you would like it. So if you were a wise ass, right, and we colonized Mars, even 50 years from now when you're dead, you'd be like, the fuck are we doing with that? You know what I mean? Something like along the line.
Yes,
how your Twitter would live on, kind of thing. But and it would be able to. Believe me, that will happen. Somebody will.
Oh yeah, they could do that for me in a heartbeat. It would just like actively be comparing whatever news headlines are trending and try to cross that over with like 90s pop music and just constantly being like, okay, but like, you know, if there was like the phrase like aqua in something where it would be like, oh, we've discovered a new shade of aqua, then the algorithm would be like, okay, make a Barbie girl joke because Aqua had the song Barbie Girl. And then it will only be other people's bots that are living on that are retweeting that, where it's like that person would have retweeted that. So let's no, for sure. Yes. They could 1,000,000% do that.
Right.
It does make me look in the mirror about like how.
You know what's funny? It was I just remember I actually have a food story about when we first met. So,
yes, because we spoke at South by Southwest.
That's right.
You were I feel like this was at the very like the last act of Billy Jensen, sort of like entertainment journalist, right? I feel like this is before.
No, so what had happened is that I was doing a lot of true crime, and then I went to Village Voice and I was running all of their digital, and it was an incredibly stressful job. So I wanted to get back into, so I didn't write any true crime for like 3 years, and I wanted to get back into writing true crime, but I felt like I couldn't just jump right back into it just because it's so heavy. So I was like, all right, let me think about a profile. And right at the same time, I was with a friend of mine, and they played the thing that Donald had done where he he did like a remix of Sufjan Stevens.
He did like a full album remix of the Illinois
thing. Yeah. And then I was from Illinois, and I was like listening to that, and she was like, oh, that's Donald Glover. I was like, who's that? I was like, oh, he's the guy from Community. And then like I found like his rap, and then I was just like, this guy's insane. This guy's crazy. This is so freaking good. And then I found the Derek stuff. And I was like, the more I got deep into it, I was like, I need to write about this guy. I want to see what makes this guy tick, because this guy's going to take over the world. And I reached out to the editor of the Village Voice. I was like, I want to write this cover story. So like, okay, cool, do it. And I hung out with him at South by Southwest, and then that's where I met you. And we were backstage at the MTV, was it the College Awards or something?
Yes, it was the MTV Woody Awards. It's funny what a weird hinge moment this represented in both of our lives, because that was the first award show I ever worked on. I was like Donald's writer on that show. He was hosting it. It was MTV2, I believe, had a like college-centric award show. Donald was hosting it. And it was funny too, because I remember I think it was either before or after that, he was like trying to pitch himself to host the VMAs, and they didn't have him host the VMAs. And the idea that like MTV would literally change its name to Donald Glover TV to get him to host the VMAs. Like the idea that they had the chance and they blew it. Anyway, but all that to say, so that was he brought me on to like be his writer. And then I ended up working, those producers kept bringing me back to write on award shows, and I've literally spent like so much of the more of the past 10 years than I would care to acknowledge writing for award shows because of that
really
game. So anyway, totally.
And I remember what you guys were trying to figure out an opening, and you wanted to have Donald say, I need a beat, and then Dave Grohl was going to walk past and say, can I have a beat? And then Dave Grohl's like, no, I don't have anything, or something like that. But Dave wouldn't do it. I remember you guys. He was like, yeah, Dave's not going to do it. I just remember that doing that backstage. But so I hung out with Donald and you, and then when we went back to New York, I hung out with Donald one night, and I remember, this is where the food stuff comes in. He's like, yeah, let's go get some food, and he's like, let's go to Banchan. I was like, what's Banchan? And he's like, you've never had Banchan? And I was like, no. And he's like, can I watch you eat it for the first time? And his face lit up the way like Donald's face lights up, And it was like, can I watch you eat it for the first time? And banchan is this, I guess is it Korean?
Korean fried chicken. Yeah, it was like a place
so
in. It's so good.
It was in St. Mark's in the Village, and it was so good. And I remember like we ended up at some like after hours party at 4:00 in the morning down in the like he was still using Twitter at the time, and he was like typing in like, hey, I'm downtown New York, where should I go now, that kind of thing, and people were throwing him stuff. I remember just ending up at that place now, but I remember that banchan thing, and now like there's banchans, they're everywhere. I think there's one in Phoenix.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
yes, you're right. I drove by it the last time I was there, and I was like, oh my god, it's such a place and time for me. But I love, Korean fried chicken is so fucking good.
It was sort of one of those things where it's just like, and I love seeing it in like it went like it's like seeing Donald and being like being able to say like this guy's going to be a star no matter what, And I named the article "Donald Glover is more talented than you." That's the name of the article. You can read it. Just do a search for that. And I was like, this guy's going to be a star. And then he takes me to a fried chicken place that becomes a star too. You know what I mean? It's like everything he was touching was going to turn to gold.
There you go. And, that's cool. I mean, it almost feels like in a weird way, it does feel like, you were kind of doing the same thing as an entertainment writer that you were doing and an arts writer that you were doing, that you do as a true crime writer, where it's like, you're connecting the dots on this thing. You're being like, okay, this guy, and he has this mixtape, but he also is a rapper. Okay. Then he also is on Community. Wait a minute. I think this guy's going to, it's like you're profiling, you're literally profiling.
Orlando Calrissian in one day. No, I didn't say that, but yeah.
That is wild. That's too fun. Yeah, that is such a moment in time. Do you want to talk at all about what you're working on right now, like the book that you're working on right now? I'm just sort of interested.
Yeah. So what I've got going on right now, obviously, I'm still doing the Murder Squad with Jensen And Holes, the Murder Squad with Paul Holes, who solved the Golden State Killer case. So we take on a new cold case every week, and I'm also on another podcast called The First Degree, where we interview someone who is 1 degree away from and tell the story that's 1 degree away from a crime, either the victim or 1 degree away from the victim or 1 degree away from the perp. So it gives a really interesting perspective. So I do that one. And the book that I'm working on now is about these serial killers that are operating under the cloak of the opioid epidemic in Ohio. And there's a lot of women that are just going missing. These women are getting hooked on pills, and then they take the pills away. Then they get hooked. They have a guy come up and say, hey, try heroin. They need to pay for the heroin. So then they get put out on the street, and then you have these guys that just are picking them up and killing them, and nobody is saying a word about it. So, and that was very much like we were talking about the jurisdictional nonsense. That was very much a lot of me putting those dots together and saying there's a pattern here, and this is a serial killer cluster. And I'm not saying, I've got about 18 women. It's not one person, it might be 4 or 5, it's not one person killing all 18. It's not like that. You're not going to see those sort of numbers anymore, like the Ted Bundys and the, well, you actually might, though, if journalism doesn't pay attention, if the police still stop, you do see those numbers in terms of interstate killers and trucker killers and things, probably, and that's still going on. But what you've got in Ohio is you've got probably a guy that every 6 months or so, just either goes out and kills somebody or does rough sex, takes too far, whatever it is, and the police just don't give a shit. So that's what I've been working on for the last, sort of 6 months. Book's about 30% done, but I'm at a point right now where I'm kind of stuck because I can't get out there, and I really need to be on the street for a lot of it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's so harrowing and fascinating. And it's such a fascinating and depressing subject when you think about sort of what are the environments that can I don't want to say foster this type of thing, but allow that type of thing to go on. Like, what are those sort of like milieus over time that, like, you talk about like California in the 70s where it was seeming, or 60s and 70s where it was just seemingly this, I think maybe even you or somebody else in I'll Be Gone in the Dark documentary refers to it as like, it was almost this just like, you know, there was so much, you know, all these serial killers, all of these cults, all of this weird ferment of things that are going on. And Haley, my wife, is a very big true crime devotee. And she's been saying for the past several weeks, you know, she was like, I don't like to think about it, but I really think we're going to look back on this time and people are going to realize that this time during the pandemic was a similar thing. Probably that there were probably, this is such a weirdly, you know, people are not seeing each other as much. People's routines are disrupted. Like, there are all of these things that make this a uniquely, I don't want to say good, but like a uniquely, a unique environment for things to go on, people to disappear, and nobody to know about it, that it does feel like there's so much social dislocation. People are, there's so much upheaval that it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, there is definitely something to that because people's routines are all different.
Right.
You know, the typical hunting grounds for serial killers. I mean, if you're looking at the 70s, a lot of that was outside of bars, which it is now too. And, you know, hitchhiking, which nobody does anymore. But you've got, so, you know, with the lack of bars, you know, these killers need to kill someplace where what's going to happen. But we are seeing, you know, we're seeing an uptick in crime in some places. And we're also seeing, you know, we just did one of our episodes that we did was there have been 7 Black transgender women murders in the past 2 months, which is, it's a huge number. It's not one person, you know, but it's just, and, you know, in doing the research on it, you know, there wasn't even that much. It's just like, you know, one of the things that we told our listeners, we said, you know, if so this happens in your hometown, you put your newspaper and you put your local TV stations on blast, and say, why are you not covering this? Because they should be. And I know everybody is overworked in the newsrooms, but it's just like, damn, you know, there was so little that we could find about some of these cases. And, you know, there is something to that. I think we're a lot more connected though. When somebody goes, when people would go, you know, before, you know, in 1978 or something like that, if somebody went missing, they weren't really missing, you know, were, if you just didn't hear from somebody for a month, you know, people don't realize now that it cost a lot to make a long distance phone call, you know,
right.
Mail took longer. You know, you didn't know anything about social media. There was none of that. So people were not nearly as connected as they are now. If somebody doesn't show up for work one day, you know, we were very much on top of, oh no, there's something going on. But back then it just wasn't like that. And, you know, it was just a totally different time. And, you know, a lot of the cases that, you know, I worked on, one of the big cases I worked on that I talk about in Chase Darkness is the Bear Brook case, which I call the Allenstown 4 case, but that's 4 bodies, a woman and 3 children found in barrels in Bear Brook State Park in New Hampshire. And when they finally identified who they were, and I've talked to the family, and it's just, and everyone was like, well, why didn't they do a missing persons report? It's just like, you just didn't, it wasn't a thing that like families would split up a lot back then. You know, somebody would just move to another place and then maybe you would get a Christmas card from them at some point, you know. It's just the way that a lot of people were. People don't realize now how connected we are now versus how, you know, just 30 years ago, how disconnected we were. And so that you see a lot of blame thrown around, like, why didn't you do a missing persons report? But it's just not that simple.
Gotcha. So that is a weird upside to all of the things that I think we all, myself included, lament about modernity, is that I guess sort of there is a easier accountability. It's easier to check in with people. People are a little more, probably even a little more on your radar than you think they are, that you would become aware more quickly if something bad had happened to them. So that is a slight positive note that hopefully cuts against some of the weird dislocation of this time period. Second to last question, complete 180 or tangent or something. You mentioned being a cocktail guy. What is your cocktail of choice, or what is your cocktail of choice right now?
My cocktail of choice right now, the HBO, did something really nice, and I don't know how they picked me, but they picked a bunch of people to send this like cocktail kit for Perry Mason, and they hid him in milk bottles. They hid the liquor in the milk bottles and all the stuff, and like it was being delivered from a farm, because Perry Mason takes place during Prohibition. So they deliver this stuff to me, and then I've been making. They had all the ingredients and a bottle of gin and a bottle of rye, and I was making a drink called the Hanky Panky, which is really good, and just the straight up this martini with orange bitters in it, which I really like a lot too. So those are the two that I've been making that were from that drink kit. So the liquor's all gone now, but I still have the stuff, so I got to go buy more liquor.
The Hanky Panky recipe, though, remains.
The Hanky Panky recipe remains, yeah.
What's in a Hanky Panky?
What was in a Hanky Panky? I don't know. I'll have to look that up, because I probably had a wait, hang on one second. But I think it was done by a wow. Don't do a search, by the way, for Hanky Panky, just saying Hanky Panky on the web, because you're going to get something completely different. I'm sorry.
You're going to get like that is the tamest, squarest person searching for porn. I want a little Hanky Panky.
Hanky Panky, yeah. Where's that Hanky Panky tag on Pornhub? Yeah.
An unfrozen guy from the 30s is trying to look up some risque playing cards online.
It's gin, sweet vermouth, and Fernie Branca.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Which I love having Fernie Branca, because that's the drink that how can I not remember this? The butler of Batman. I'm gonna lose all my
Alfred.
Batman friend.
You're talking about Michael Caine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the drink that he has. I'm going to have a Fernie Branca, and then he sees Christian Bale, and then they just nod heads, saying Fernie Branca. So
it's a very like over
straight, but it's good mixing now.
Oh wow, that sounds bracing. Yeah, I'll have to give it a try.
Yes.
And then final question, Billy Jensen, if there could be something from childhood that you had growing up, something fancy you ordered in a restaurant once, if you could snap your fingers and know how to make one thing perfectly every time you made it, what would that thing be?
Interesting. You know what? My mother used to make these things called little Italian steaks, and they were steaks that she would pound and then bread, and then you'd put lemon over it. You squeeze lemon over it, and those are probably the meal that I would want to like. And it would very well might have come from that same McCall's cookbook, but they called them little Italian steaks, and that's a meal that I always like. If my mom loves to cook for me, so I always ask for that whenever I would go over there. So that would be the meal. Little Italian steaks.
Little Italian steaks. That is wonderful. It's almost like an Italian chicken fried steak.
It's very, very similar. Yeah, not fried, but I think it was broiled. But yeah, very similar.
Oh, yum! Little Italian steaks. We're going to leave it there, and you know what? I think it's achievable. I think somebody's going to find little Italian steaks, and I like this for you. You're going to get some tiny steaks next time you go to Trader Joe's.
Sounds good.
Thanks a lot, Billy. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for doing the show.
Thanks so much, buddy.
That is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you to my guest, Billy Jensen. Please check out Jensen and Holes Murder Squad. Please check out The First Degree wherever pods are cast. And while you do that, please rate and subscribe this very podcast if you haven't done so already. Wherever you are listening to it, there's probably some stars you can click. I'll hope that you click 5 of them is what I'll hope. And that helps people find the show, and that in turn helps there be more show. You can follow me at DC Pierson on Twitter, at DEECEE Pierson on Instagram. If you decide to cook along at home, please take a picture and tag me. I would love to see what you make. My intro song is July 4th, 2004 by Jason Anderson. My interstitial music is by Advanced Bass, the amazing Owen Ashworth, and my podcast art is by Sarah Beacon, that is Becan. I've written a couple of novels, The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep and Never Had To, and Crap Kingdom. Those are available wherever books are sold. Please support your local independent bookstore in whatever form they exist right now. I also read the audiobook versions of both of those books. You can get those wherever audiobooks are brought to you. I will talk to you next week. Bye.